For today's assignment, I'm going to read an argumentative essay that I wrote about the influence of fake news on society. The influence of fake news on society. Throughout the final semester of my college experience, I have read several articles regarding fake news and the definition of fake news. And based on the varying definitions, there isn't one question that we need to answer regarding what is fake news. There are multiple. A study conducted determined that fake news is news articles that are intentionally and verifiably false and can mislead others. Fake news has two main motivating factors, financial and ideological. Fake news providers publish these stories to convince a mass audience to believe one thing over another by discrediting someone or something, similar to the 2020 presidential election. On social media, the more outrageous the fake news story, the more clicks it receives, and ultimately the more money the publishing company makes. However, the issue isn't just fake news, it's the lack of prosecution laws against the reproduction of fake news, and as a result, the long-term negative effects it is having on the U.S. citizens of today. These long-term effects include misleading publications, lack of authentic news coverage, and a silence of citizen voices. These effects, due to fake news in the media, have shifted present-day news culture. We live in a society where citizens read the majority of their news on the internet, specifically social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, which are notorious for developing fake news stories. An increase in fake news on social media was seen during the 2016 presidential election as memes and satirical articles were passed around referring to each candidate. This spread of fake news grew even more in the last 2 years due to the pandemic. Citizens were left in the house with limited resources for entertainment and therefore seek social media platforms to stay entertained and informed. To begin with, due to the lack of prosecution laws, a lot of fake news publications have consistently published falsified content into the general public and gotten away with it. This content has sometimes also been proven to be very detrimental and inciting nationwide chaos as well as civilian attacks. For example, October 30th, 1938, the Columbia Broadcasting System aired a live radio special narrating the Worlds written by H.G. Wells. During the live one-hour program, Wells' novel was reenacted, and the setting changed to 1938. For the first 20 minutes, the special started as a regular evening of programming, interrupted by a series of news bulletins about an explosion on Mars. This explosion then lands on a farm in Grover's Mill, New Jersey, and is met by both spectators and police. Then listeners hear that the explosion is actually aliens and they are currently taking over the United States while the U.S. military tries to defend the country, and all of this sparks nationwide chaos in 60 minutes. At the time, a Sunday evening in 1938 was prime time in the golden age of radio, and millions of Americans had their radios turned on, according to History.com. You might wonder how the Columbia Broadcasting System could get away with causing a national riot and not tell the general public it was false to stop any panic, but they actually did. Prior to the segment being aired, listeners were told it was false, and they even told listeners during the segment it was false, yet somehow in a turn of events it was still perceived to be true. The issue is seen above with fake news is that most stories are extremely misleading, and unfortunately in most cases citizens cannot understand the difference between satirical news or fake news from authentic news, and in many cases it has led to chaos. As a result, we need to increase prosecution laws to limit the publication of fake news and ultimately try to eliminate some of that national chaos. Additionally, due to the lack of prosecution laws, there has been a lack of coverage in authentic news journalism. Credible news sources now spend a lot of their resources disproving fake news stories instead of using their resources on authentic news stories. Due to the enforcement of laws, a lot of stories are published freely, and in order to steer nationwide chaos, credible news resources spend a lot of their efforts notifying the general public that stories such as Pizzagate are false. Pizzagate is one of the most compelling fake news stories of all time. Rob, 2017. Pizzagate, a story that went extremely viral on Facebook and other social media platforms during the 2016 election, according to Amanda Robb's article, editor at Rolling Stone magazine, was a child sex trafficking ring that was allegedly run by Democratic national officials along with other public figures that operated out of the Comet Pizza store in Washington, D.C. As a result of the circulation of this story, major credible news networks such as MSNBC, Fox, and CNN immediately began to disprove the conspiracy theory because of its mass circulation and growth. Due to this mass circulation, a gunman walked into the Comet in December 2016 and opened fire because he believed he was saving children from a child sex trafficking ring. Although no one was injured, it was a life-threatening situation that could have been prevented if prosecution laws weren't so lenient with fake news. It could have also been prevented if major news networks did not have to spend as much time on covering fake news stories to disprove them. Another major effect the lack of prosecution laws is having on citizens is allowing fake news to silence some citizen voices. Understand, people seek out fake news because of the interesting and varying perspectives that traditional journalism sometimes can lack. Social platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter provide influence in addition to the varying perspective. Journalist Laura Spinney, the author of The Shared Past That Wasn't, explains to readers how easily our memories are influenced, especially in mass audiences. In the past, individual circumstances and experiences have shaped our memory and perspectives, and that still rings true today. For example, young adults protesting during the 2020 Black Lives Matter movement felt compelled to march every day, even though they faced adversity and violence, whereas their parents, on the other hand, who grew up in another generation, might have viewed the protests as disruptive and chaotic, wanting absolutely nothing to do with them. A lot of this change comes from the access that we have today to social platforms and other platforms that allows us to connect to mass audiences. Although all the information that we read online is not true, a mass common idea has enough power to influence others and silence many. A study analyzed in Spinney's article states that collective memory is a double-edged sword. Some will no doubt use it to mislead others. The fact that information can freely circulate in the community has been one of the most important and constructive features open and up to democratic societies, but creating such societies does not inherently guarantee positive outcomes, and as a result, you do have certain stories circulating, such as Pizzagate. Fake news has ruined the lives of many and the livelihoods of many. Since the surge in social media usage coupled with the influence of social media, fake news has been able to influence masses of people. Once it reaches millions online that believe it to be true, the result is a true fake story, and it is not very easy to persuade someone once they already have their mind made up. And if they get to add their opinion to a comment section on a social platform and it gets 2,000 plus likes, now that's a group of people with a common idea giving them substance, which in many cases has silenced many people and generated thousands of arguments online with others. However, there are some laws that do try to attempt to prosecute publishers of fake news. Only the amount of cases that are actually convicted are fewer than the amount of publications charged each year. The first thing to know, there are several laws that fake news publishers have to heed to. Fake News, A Legal Perspective by David Klein and Joshua Wheeler is an article that informs the readers about the legal issues the fake news publishers potentially face. It begins with providing several examples of the legal issues that fake news publishers face when distributing content to the media. In 1999, the Dallas Observer published an article stating that a local judge detained a girl, shackled her ankles for publishing an article regarding where the wild things are. This article was fake news, and as a result, the Observer was sued by the judge for defamation. However, defamation can only be admissible in court if the plaintiff can prove that the publisher published the article with malice intent. And since the judge cannot do that, the case was dismissed. This article also includes other examples of potential legal concerns, such as international infliction of emotional distress, IP violations, and false light invasion of privacy, etc., providing clear definitions of each and using examples of various court cases, all for the most part which have been dismissed. In conclusion, fake news has been around since the early 1400s and has recently gained more attention because of the 2016 election and the widespread use of social media. During the election, we heard the term fake news frequently from both political parties. It can make one start to question, what is fake news? How do I recognize it? Fake news is not new. It is very common, and fact-checking can help prevent someone from falling victim to the centuries-long trap. When analyzing media in general, we must remember that a large purpose of the media is to entertain, and there is always some falsity in entertainment. There are ways to help combat the spread of fake news. Check your sources, stick to the same consistent sources, and please use proper judgment. Everything that we read isn't real, which is proven time and time again. There are countless of stories that have been published and then redacted by platforms because of the serious implications. However, unfortunately, at that point, it is too late. Once a story is published, it is out there forever, and it is up to readers such as ourselves to use proper judgment when consuming their information. There is only so much that print journalism can do to combat the spread of fake news. Even when they attempt to address fake news, authentic journalism publications covering fake stories can sometimes have more influence on the story itself, such as Pizzagate. Moving forward, publications can try to keep such stories only circulating on social media platforms. By not covering the same stories on credible journalistic platforms, it will start to show a clear divide between fake and authentic journalism. However, it is also prosecutors' jobs to begin amending certain laws so that it is not so simple for publications to get away with producing fake news. We need to make this content less accessible to the general public for general safety.